Expand your mind and enrich your world. It's time for another outstanding podcast from ICRT.
From ICRT, this is HereSay, with another round of real-life stories from your friends and neighbors in Taiwan. I'm Keith Menconi, and in this hour, we'll be listening to some of the stories told throughout the year at Taipei Story Slam events, all on the theme Friend or Foe. Those times where we're just not sure where the other guy is coming from. Now, for those of you who have never been, at Taipei Story Slam, storytellers are asked to prepare a 7-minute story based on a theme. They're also given a couple of rules. First, their stories have to be true, they have to be from personal experience, and they have to be told completely from memory. In keeping with the theme, Friend or Foe, in this hour, we're raising doubts, people, about other people. Bringing you stories on questions like, can this guy be trusted? Why have those girls been smiling at me so long? Is that guy quirky or straight up crazy? But first up, how can I trust you when I don't even understand what you're saying? Amelia Easton takes us on an international solo trek and learns that while trekking solo, you've got to get pretty good at telling the friends from the foes. Here she is, live at Taipei Story Slam.
So, one time, about 2 years ago, 7 a.m. in the morning, I woke up on a shelf on a train in Ukraine. It was just one of those days, I guess. We all have them. And when I say shelf, it was about yay wide, 2 meters off the floor, pretty difficult to sleep on. So yeah, I was woken up by the fact that most of my carriage companions were these Russian babushkas and their grandchildren. I don't know why. Third-class carriages in Ukraine are literally a corridor lined with shelves, and you sleep on them. And so all these grandmothers had woken up with the crack of dawn and were eating apples, and they were also drinking these cups of tea, which mysteriously materialized on trains, and I never found out where from in my entire time in Ukraine. These cups of tea just appeared. So I was really, really underslept because I was in a completely different country. There was Russian all around me. Yeah, I didn't know where I was. The whole train was shaking. I was worried I would fall off my shelf. And I really, really needed to pee. So I hopped off my shelf, which was kind of difficult without breaking an ankle. No ladder. And wandered towards most of the people seemed to be congregating, which I assumed was the bathroom. And by most of the people, I mean a lot of really large, hairy, pot-bellied Russian men, all wearing like wife-beater tops with hair poking out. And the hairiest, most stubbled, noticed me and just started laughing. Like, where are you from? UK? Crazy English, he shouted down the entire carriage. I didn't know what was going on. It was 7 a.m. I was in Ukraine. I don't know how I got there. It seemed like a good idea because of all the rhymes of going to Ukraine on a train and coming back on a plane. It's just like that. And this guy was shouting at me crazy English. And then he started pointing at my feet and slapping all his friends. And they were all laughing, literally doubled over, laughing. And and I was in socks. It turned out this was the hilarious thing, was I was in socks and the bathroom floor, of course, was soaking wet because everyone had been in there washing their face, doing God knows what else. And this made us best of friends. So he grabbed me by the shoulder, ignoring the fact that I was going to the bathroom for a purpose, and pulled me down the corridor. My wife, she will meet you. Okay. And his wife, it turned out, spoke amazing English because she'd learned English at high school because she wanted to read Hemingway in the original, which was lovely, and she hadn't had the chance to speak it until 40 years later when FIFA came to Ukraine, and suddenly loads of Brits and English speakers came to her hostel or hotel, where also I was supposed to visit with my mother. I don't know why. So the man, the husband, and his Polish friend started talking in Russian, telling these filthy, filthy jokes, which she very, very selectively translated. And at one stage, the man clearly had a brainwave and turned towards the wife and said something very, very enthusiastically in Russian. And she looked at me, looked completely bemused, and said, "He wants me to tell you that we have 2 sons. 125, 127, both very nice, speak good English, very handsome. But I don't know why he wants me to tell you this, because they both have girls." So that's how I nearly became a Russian bride. And a week later, I was on a bus in Crimea, down right at the bottom. It was Ukraine at the time, it is now Russia. And I was having trouble because my host spoke bad English, the bus driver spoke no English, and I was on the phone to the host for that night and handed the phone to the bus driver. And apparently I was supposed to get off outside the city in the middle of nowhere, I don't know where. The bus driver didn't know where, my host couldn't explain where. The bus driver was more confused than me. But this woman appeared sitting next to me who spoke amazing English. And again, I met 3 people in 2 weeks who were Ukrainian and spoke good English. So I am not exaggerating how lucky this was. And so she sorted my problem, which was amazing. And then we started talking. And when she heard I was from the UK, she was so excited because, my husband, he is Bob Skinner. He is from England. He is from Lancashire. And he lives with us. He is amazing. He makes me feel like woman. No Ukrainian man, they make me do all the work. He make me feel like beautiful woman. And she was so enthusiastic about this man. And of course, completely hating on me for traveling alone around Ukraine with no specific plan as a solo female. Apparently, if I was her daughter, she would have killed me. And so she took my number and stayed with me until the host met up with me, which was lovely. And that night I got a phone call from Bob Skinner, who was very, very enthusiastic. He'd been here for 6 years and had never met another British person traveling around Ukraine or Crimea, specifically Crimea. And now he lived in the hills, in the hillside in Crimea, farming goats, miles from anywhere else. And he was completely happy with this and happy with his lot in life, and it could not be better. And I have an open invitation to go back there and farm goats with them in Crimea. And this is the moral of the story of why when you're traveling alone in strange lands, you should never, ever turn down the opportunity to talk to strangers for the fear they might be foe. Because I know that if ever I go back to Ukraine, I can find a husband and farm goats, and that can be my life.
That was Amelia Easton. She recently graduated from college and is a newcomer to Taiwan. She's working hard teaching English. Really hard, actually, from the sounds of it. After I spoke with her, I have a new appreciation for how hard new English teachers work in Taiwan. Kind of made me wonder, though, if she regrets not getting on board with that whole goat farming thing. Now, this next story is kind of on a similar theme. You know, the should we be trusting this foreigner theme. Except this time, the foreigner in question is, well, me. This is a story I told a while back at a Story Slam event. Thought I'd throw it in the mix. Here it is.
So I think pretty much the experience of living in Taiwan for me has just been that there's all these situations where there's all these things going on and there's about a billion ways that you could interpret them, and you're never quite sure what is the correct way to interpret them. So here's a night where a lot of stuff happened, still not quite sure how to interpret what really happened. So at the time, I was going to school at Shida, studying Chinese. So we often went to Roxy Rocker. And we got out of there at about 1 in the morning one night. And just to get some food, we went to the 7 that was right next door. And I go inside, and I'm getting ready to pay for my stuff. And I go to the counter, and there's nobody behind the counter. So I start looking around the store, trying to see if there's anybody inside. And after about 2 minutes, it becomes really, really clear that there's no people that work at the store in this store. The lights are on, the door's open, like there's like customers walking around, but there's no workers at all anywhere in the store. My friend who was with me at the time was a little bit more adventurous than me, and he actually like went on down into the basement of the store and like kind of looked around to see if there was anybody down there. Nobody. There's nothing. And so we were a little drunk, so instead of like reporting it or solving the situation, we decided that we would stand in front of the store just to see what would happen. Because, I mean, if we just like compare this to how this would go in the U.S., like I'm from near San Francisco, so if in San Francisco there's a store where there's no clerks for 5 minutes in San Francisco, there's no store by the morning. It's just gone. But as we watched, it became like very clear that like people, you don't really need like the authority figure of a sales clerk to make stores work in Taiwan. We were watching, and people would like, just over and over again, people would like pick up their good, walk around, and they'd have one of two reactions when they'd slowly dawned on them that there was nobody in the store. They would look around, be confused. Either they'd put the good back, or they'd go up to the counter and put money on the counter. And there was like this slowly growing pile of money on the counter, like thousands of NT after a while. Nobody even like looked at the pile of money. They're just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I guess I would just add to it. Whatever. Finally, about 4 hours in, still like this pile of money is just growing and growing and growing. Finally, like this, about 3 hours in, what happens is a police officer comes, and we're like, finally, all right, somebody must have called the cops. All right, this is going to resolve itself. Police officer comes, looks around, there's like a clipboard on the table. He picks it up, initials it, puts it back down, walks out. Doesn't ask any questions. He's just gone. Like, oh, okay, I guess that isn't going to resolve the situation either. But finally, like, this delivery guy comes, and he's, like, looking around and looking for somebody to sign it, and I go up to him and I explain, like, oh, there hasn't been a clerk in here for 4 hours. And he says, oh, I should call the manager about that. That seems important. So he calls the manager calls the cops. About an hour later, the cops finally show up, and they think it's funny as hell. They think it's like the funniest thing that's ever happened. The crazy thing, though, is they didn't ask me and my friend to leave. Like they got there, and they're like looking around, and they're like waiting for the manager to show up, and whenever a customer comes in, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, it's closed, there's no people here, or there's no staff here. So they would turn new customers away, but me and my friend, we were just like in the in crowd for some reason, and we were just like hanging out with them, like chatting with them, like, oh yeah, this is weird, right? Super weird. I tried to get a selfie with them, and they weren't down. That was their limit. That was the extent of their niceness. Finally, the manager did get there, and he was so thankful to me and my friend, and it made me feel like such an asshole, because we were just being stupid Waigoren and kind of like staring at the shop. But the manager got there and was like, oh, thank you for looking after my shop. I really appreciate it. Keeping an eye on everything, making sure nobody was going to steal it. Thank you so much. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. My pleasure. All in a day's work as a Waigoren. So finally, it seems like the cops kind of have it under control. We leave the scene. Still don't really know what happened. About a month later, I'm packing up. I'm leaving Da'an. This is in the Da'an district, and I'm leaving. And before I go, I decide I'm going to make one more visit to this 7-Eleven. And so I go into the 7-Eleven, and so this time there is a clerk behind the counter. And I ask him, I say, hey, like a month ago, there was like a night where there was no like clerk here. Do you have any idea what happened that night? Does that sound familiar to you? And he's like, oh, yeah. The clerk took all the money and, like, ran away. But we got him. Like, he's been arrested. I think that's what he said. My Chinese is kind of so he might have said something different. Like, it's possible he said something totally different. But based on my best understanding of Chinese, that's what happened that night. Thank you.
So, was I a friend to that 7-Eleven? Was I a foe? I don't know. Well, anyway, there's enough honest people to get by without me. Hopefully. All right, we're going to take a little break. HereSay will be back in just a moment with more stories, and I promise the rest are from people who are not me. Stay tuned. Welcome back. This is HereSay. I'm Keith Manconi. If you're just joining us, today we're listening to stories from Taipei Story Slam, all asking the question, what's behind that smiling face? Is this a friend or is this a foe? Up next, we got a story from American expat James Clunder about let's call it a personnel issue he faced at his job teaching English in Taiwan. Here's his story.
So what happens, about 2 years ago, I was at a school and I met a guy, his name is John, and he was a brand new teacher, a Taiwanese guy, about 6'1". It's kind of intimidating too. You kind of think you're going to be a tall foreigner and you find out some guy's taller. It kind of puts you in perspective. So he was a tall Taiwanese guy, and the first time I shook his hand, I don't know if you've ever done that, but you shake someone's hand and they're actually physically shaking. It's a hand shaking, but they're actually shaking. It's kind of a nervousness, and it's kind of freaky and creepy the first time you do it. It's kind of wet and then shaking a lot. And it kind of made me nervous too, because I could see that he wasn't really right. He was just maybe, I'm intense, but he is intense. So we meet, and then about, for those, how many of you are actually teachers? How many of you are teachers? Right now is a kind of interesting time because we're working on Reader's Theater and we're working on drama. And he was actually teamed up with me to do drama with the kids. So we finally, about 3 weeks after meeting, we got a chance to actually do the competition. We went to a school and we were having a good time. We were talking and we go and he says, let's take off for a while. So we take off and we're walking. He just takes off. He just takes off. And I'm thinking, where is he going? So he has his backpack, and he takes it to an area to clean, and he starts cleaning his backpack. And it seems like a normal thing, but when you watch someone clean their backpack at an event like that, you're thinking, what is he doing? It's just so... Nobody does that. It's not just cleaning, but it was like detailing. And I was wondering why he did that. I was thinking, first of all, it's shake, and then the one part that drove me crazy, and I think my story is more about venting than anything else, is that he was so intense about the backpack, it just made me wonder, what did Dahmer do the night before? Why is it important to clean a backpack? And about 50 minutes later or so, we were done with our activity, and it's customary for us to all leave together. So we leave, and I'm walking with him, and the ladies are behind me, and he's walking pretty fast. He's just that kind of... Remember, I told you he's intense. And so John is walking with me, and he's walking really fast. And I say, by the way, you're walking pretty fast. Why don't we just have a race? I was just kidding around. But he takes off. This guy is a 6'1" Taiwanese guy, but he takes off running. And it was no joke. I wish some of the stuff was funny, but he actually took off like it was a competitive event. And, of course, I'm disqualified because I don't have a backpack. So I was thinking, what are you doing? And I'm thinking, first of all, you're washing your backpack. Second of all, you're seriously running. And what I mean by running is that we did not see him till Monday. It wasn't like he waited for us and was joking around. So on Monday, he got back to school and he saw a lot of us talking. He was kind of, you can tell in his mind, he was thinking, okay, if you guys are going to talk about me, you can tell he knew who we were talking about. So during the days, as we get closer to the end of the year, he started doing some crazy stuff. During meetings, he would complain. He'd come to me and say, I'm not your slave. You can't control me. Stuff that seriously, I don't know if all of you have been through it before. You can't make this. It's like Hollywood stuff, but it's not as funny or cool. It's scary. So he would say stuff like that during meetings to the point where I was scared to go to meetings. And then worse is we were sitting next to each other, and the cubicles have a little bit of a crease. There's a borderline. And I put a fan down. Well, this guy comes in. I'm sitting down. And he goes, this is not the right spot. And he kicks my fan. I'm like, hold on. What's going on here? It's just crazy. Someone's missing the screw when that happens. And during the year, these things happen a lot. He would just kick the fan. Or one time I was in a room, and I was actually putting up decorations. Sometimes they have you decorate classrooms. And he comes in there, and he actually comes in and closes the lights. I was like, what? I'm just standing there doing my work, and he comes and turns them off. And I go there and say, hey, what happened to the lights? And he goes, I didn't know you were in there. Come on, seriously. You could tell I was there. Everyone knows I was there. And I go, and he goes, why are you being so confrontational? The idea is throughout the year we had problems like that, just stuff that you wouldn't normally have to deal with, but I did. And, the management sometimes, the idea is that they want everything to be okay. Don't panic. As long as we'll talk to him, we'll talk to you. But actually during the year I figured out one thing. First of all, it's just too small of a place. So I got with one of my coworkers. We decided to take cooking lessons, actually baking lessons. So I got certified in baking bread. But I got certified. Yeah, that's right. A little something for me. So I got a certification. I took salsa. I don't know how many of you take salsa, but I took salsa for a couple months, and that was terrible. But that's okay. And what's funny is, not many people dance with you if you're not good enough. It's actually a competitive thing. So I wasn't good enough to get partners. I took salsa, and then I took a lot of things. I started taking some judo, which is not a big deal, but the idea is I started expanding myself. So I think about my time, really, and I look at it this way. No matter what, everyone around you really helps you out. They do help you out in one way or another. And I figured out, actually, he helped me because the situation was so bad. I had to find something to do outside of our area. And before I met him, I didn't do anything. I went home, I watched TV. I didn't play video games. I watched TV. I did some normal stuff. I maybe jog, but because of him, I really expanded myself. So I don't hope you have a John at your place. I hope you don't have a John in your life, but I hope you do expand your horizons. And I just want to thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you.
That was James Klunder. He's lived and worked in Taiwan for 5 years. On top of teaching, he also writes stories. You can find his children's book, Anna's Amazing Machine, at public schools in Taipei, or, by Googling it. So friend, foe, when you've got that extra barrier of, different language, different culture, sometimes these things can be tricky things to sort out. And after the show, James told me that when he first got to Taiwan, he mostly hung out with local Taiwanese. So I wanted to know if language was ever an issue. He told me no.
I think really it's based on personality. If you're funny and you're outgoing and people trust you, wow, you can just use body language. There's a lot of things you can do besides the spoken word. I find as long as you get the right attitude, you can meet someone that doesn't speak English at all and you can work on something and be happy with them. They can understand what you're trying to do. The key is they're not liking you because you're English. They like you because your personality. I've never liked them because they spoke English. I've liked them because I feel like I can trust them. And you can look at somebody's face and the way they act, and you can trust somebody. Sometimes when they open their mouth, it changes.
On the other hand, though, he says the language and culture gap does make a big difference in the classroom. He taught for 3 years in the U.S. before coming to Taiwan, and he says there's a lot of little things that were easier back at home.
If you're around people that speak English and they live in the U.S., you have a relationship, which means you live in the same country, you speak the same language, you pretty much go to the same restaurants, have sort of the same kind of hobbies if you think about it. When you enjoy going to the park, you can build a lot more relationship off your language because you already speak it. That's the primary way to communicate with somebody. So when you come to Taiwan and you're in a class and you're trying to speak English to people that don't speak English very well, you don't have that instant relationship. You have to build it.
All right, up next, we're going to hear a story from American expat Eliza Pennell about just what happens when romance goes global. Here she is, live at Taipei Story Slam.
Mine is a classic tale. Boy meets girl on OkCupid. Boy's a bit awkward in person, but in a cool way, girl decides, and damn it if his freckles aren't nice to look at. Boy tells girl that he's moving to Korea in a few months, just so she knows. Girl's like, who are you, Mandy Moore from A Walk to Remember? Are you warning me not to fall in love with you? Don't worry about it. But they start catching feelings. Boy says he's falling in love. Girl's like, don't start that, Korea. But they start that. And it's perfect and it sucks. And as promised, a few months later, Boy moves to the other side of the planet. He says bye. He says, I love you. He says not enough else in terms of where girl fits in. I'm the girl in this story, and I was confused. I was devastated in a way, but not devastated enough or not devastated in a clean enough way. So rather than just crying for a few weeks and buying out the campus store supply of Ben & Jerry's and getting on with things, I agonized over it, and I thought about it ceaselessly. And I bought out the campus store supply of Ben & Jerry's. And I also received emails that alternately said things like, I really, really missed you, and it was so difficult to be away from you for the first couple months. But I'm kind of over it. It's great. And I am still madly in love with you. You are my best friend. I need to see you. So, ignoring logic, ignoring my dwindling bank account, ignoring the little voice inside that was like, hey girl, what you doing? I chased a boy to Korea. To South Korea. I would do anything for love, but I probably wouldn't go to that other place, even if I wanted to. And when I got there, things were off. The best comparison I can draw, I hate to liken this boy to my parents for several obvious reasons, but you know that moment when you're a little kid and with blind trust you reach out and grab your mom's leg in the middle of the supermarket and you look up and it's not your mom? It was like that. It was not my mom. And I was staying with him for a few weeks. Towards the end of my stay, he flat out told me he just wasn't feeling it. That night, he was gone for work. I went out with a few foreigners I had met through him. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the 50 proof, cheaper than water, poisonous sweetheart of Korea that is soju. But it's fair to say that I got distinctly drunker than intended. One moment I was singing Wonderwall with everybody in a KTV room and killing it, I might add. And the next, I was waking up naked next to one of them in a strange bed. And that experience is not as funny as a Katherine Heigl movie will try to convince you that it is. I don't know if you've ever had to come to terms with the fact that that must have happened, despite you having no recollection of being part of that decision. Statistically speaking, some of you might have had to deal with those things, and I'm sorry because it sucks. At the time, I felt so guilty, and I told the guy, my guy, and he was upset. He was very upset. Confusingly so, ever the flip-flopper. And I was leaving almost immediately, so we very quickly tried to figure out what this meant, how much we would stay in touch, how we could still be friends. We were important to each other. And then he told me he had lost so much respect for me. And I was like, wait, what? This is important to me? No, shutting this down. And it was such an absurdly disgusting, ridiculously horrible thing to say to me that I was filled with a giddy relief. Relief at how big the world is. Relief at how full the world is of people who won't essentially spell out slut at me the moment I dare to sleep with someone other than them, if you can even say that that is precisely what happened. After telling me that they're basically done with me anyway. No, the world was big, much bigger than the very small person who was not a bad person, but who was deciding to be a junk person standing in front of me. And yeah, I knew the world is also full of people who will call me names, but this was a great reminder that I never have to make space in my life for friends like that. Thank you.
That was Eliza Pennell. She's another newcomer to Taiwan. So far, she's spent her time here teaching English and getting to know the island. Now, I wanted to put that same question that we just heard to her. Does the language barrier make it difficult to make friends? If you remember, James gave me an emphatic no. I got a somewhat different answer from Eliza. She says her weak Chinese skills has made it hard to meet as many locals here as she would like.
My Chinese is not really at a level where it's interesting to converse with me. But, I mean, I have made Taiwanese friends and other foreign friends.
So you've traveled abroad before. I mean, you mentioned to me that you went to New Zealand for a time, and that's obviously an English-speaking country. So I'm curious, like, in terms of making friends, would you say that the experience there was really different from what you've experienced in Taiwan?
It's been very different. It's been very different because when I'm in a country where I know everyone speaks English, I actually do enjoy approaching people, starting conversations with people, and I'm not confident enough to do that here all the time. I think it's just kind of crappy for me to go up to a Taiwanese person and expect them to speak English with me. But when I meet Taiwanese people through other people, or when Taiwanese people approach me, which does happen fairly frequently, it's been, easy to make friends. It's just been different how it's happened.
So it sounds like Eliza has done a fair amount of traveling, maybe a bit of wanderlust there. I asked why. Why is she so interested in traveling? Normally this is a pretty boring question, and I try to avoid it. But I really liked her answer, and I think it pretty well sums up why it is that so many storytellers have washed up in Taiwan.
I think part of it is that I do really enjoy storytelling and writing, and I have some experience dabbling in stand-up comedy. And I've always just been able to get better stories when I travel. And the experiences that the stories come from are fun or terrible or transformative. So they're great by themselves. But also having those stories just feels really good because writing and storytelling is such a big part of my life.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that you feel like your best material for story making, stand-up, whatever, comes from traveling.
Yeah. And I think, you only live once. You want the one life you have to be the best material.
All right, time for one last break. HereSay will return in just a minute with more stories of friends and foes and quite a few shifty folk who fall somewhere in between. Stay tuned. You're listening to HereSay on ICRT FM 100, bringing you stories that ask the question, be ye friend or be ye foe? As always, our stories are coming to you straight out of Taipei, right from a little group called Taipei Story Slam. Now, if you like what you're hearing, you really do have to make it down to one of their shows. They've got a whole lot more stories just like this, with new shows the last Thursday of every month. You can learn more at Taipei Story Slam's Facebook page. Our next storyteller is Jane Wong. Her background's a little complicated. Bear with me. Jane was born in Taiwan, but grew up in the U.S. She's back in Taiwan now, working. But this story is from a number of years ago when she was living and working in Japan. Okay, you got all that? Either way, here she is, live at Taipei Story Slam.
Hi, everyone. Hi. So, this story goes way back. Years ago when I was fresh out of graduate school and I was about to start my first real job in Tokyo. So yeah, that was back a lifetime ago. I pranced around in high heels and my office lady wear, and it was like, I walked into like tall skyscrapers every day. Very different life from now. And I was really excited to get my first real income. That was very important to me, to the first chance to live in a foreign country and all these exciting things. And so my boss, his name was Hashimoto-san. So he he invited me to a couple dinners, and like one of them was like in his hotel suite, and I thought, okay, he's kind of like a ladies' man, but okay, maybe this is just how things are done in Japan. So he's going to be my boss. And so, we start our first week, and everything's going well. Meet all my colleagues, and so Friday rolls around, and I'm going out with my friends to have dinner, and they have friends coming from San Francisco. We all go out to KTV, and then we miss the train, and we're out in Roppongi. And you guys, so you know Roppongi. It was where all the foreigners hang out, and has all the classy bars and restaurants, and also the not so classy ones. And so we end up at Gas Panic. Some of you might know. Yes. And it's really kind of seedy and crowded, and the first floor. So some of my friends and I, we kind of wander up to the second floor to take a breather, look in, and get to the bar, order a drink, sit down, turn around. I'm just sipping my drink. There's a Japanese salaryman with a Russian blonde chick. They're really drunk. It's like 2:30 a.m. I'm sipping my drink. Oh my god. I think that looks really familiar. So I run to the corner, just to make sure. That's my boss. And I'm just making sure, and I'm thinking, oh, he has a wife and 2 kids in another prefecture. Okay, so my friends are looking at me like, what? Why are you running into the corner like that? So I'm just like, okay. I get back there. I'm like, okay, let's go. No, why? We just got up here. And so I get down, and I tell them. They're like, Ken, my friend Ken's like, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, that was my boss. He's like, oh, you should have just gone up to him and, hey, Hashimoto-san, what's up? And then you would have had really good blackmail for the future. I was like, I just wanted to keep my first real job, and it didn't want it to be awkward. And so a couple weeks later, and very personal Japanese style, so he sits me down. He's going to go to Taiwan to visit for a business trip, so he's like, I would like to meet your parents, because I heard that, so, I know that you really respect your father, and I hope that my daughter respects me just as much. And I'm thinking, only she knew. So that was my introduction to Japan and to how things are done in Japan. And also, the lesson was, no matter how big of a city in the middle of Tokyo, just don't do anything bad, because you will get caught, and you may never know it. Thank you.
That was Jane Wong. She's a cross-cultural trainer working at a number of places in Taiwan, including the Community Services Center. So she's worked in the U.S., Japan, Taiwan as well. And obviously, no matter where you are, work isn't just work, it's also people. You got to stay friends with people. You don't want any foes. So I asked her if she ever ran into any problems dealing with all these different cultures. Here's one of her examples. She told me that in Japan in particular, the hierarchy of the companies was a bit of an issue and took a little while for her to understand.
When I was first there in Japan, I was having a discussion with what they would call senpai, so somebody who was a bit older than me. But we were on the same team. And I didn't know at the time that I was supposed to defer to him or be very respectful. I've since learned all these things. But at the time, I was just coming from an American's point of view. If I didn't understand something, I was quite assertive, or I would ask questions, or I treated him like an equal, without realizing that, first of all, he was older than me, and second of all, he had been at the company, obviously, a lot longer than me. So the whole attitude with which I approached him should have been different.
But she says when she was hired, they knew she was an American, so there was a support network in place for her.
I was lucky to have that. Otherwise, I might have been booted out a while ago. But yeah, I think I made a couple enemies because of that. But later on, I think they were okay. That's the thing about a Japanese company, which it's kind of like being in college or at school, maybe even smaller than college, where you kind of know everyone and you might get upset about certain things, but you kind of see each other so much and work with each other anyway that you kind of forgive one another. You just work on stuff together, and in the end, you're okay.
Since then, like I said, she's started working as a cross-cultural trainer here in Taiwan. So I was pretty sure she must have some thoughts on how she could have, made that cultural transition a bit smoother for herself. So I asked her what she would now tell somebody with the same problem she had then.
Well, that's what I do in my cross-cultural training work. First thing is to help somebody be able to see their own cultural values, even in communicating. So, for example, in the example I gave, right, I value equality, right? I valued direct communication. And to be able to step back and go, hey, that is a cultural value. It has been reinforced by American values because that's where I grew up. And then saying, okay, where does Japan come from? And where and why do they value what is actually a very nasty word in English, this thing called hierarchy, right? Why do they value this? And, why do they value this sort of more indirect communication? So you kind of take a look at that, and then you also inform them of the entire worldview from which the other culture they're entering is coming from. Help them see that, the world they're stepping into, it is entire world, and it's very internally coherent. It makes sense in that world why you would behave that way. And when you're entering that world, it doesn't mean that you have to give up yourself. You just need to learn new skills. Think of it as expanding new skills to be able to actually communicate more effectively instead of just only using your own way. So that's what I would have liked to have been told. But if you had just told me, be indirect, respect your elders, if you just told me that, it would have been hard to swallow.
That was pretty good advice, gotta say. Hope all you cross-cultural worker bees out there were taking notes. Last up today, we're going to be changing things up a little bit. This one is from Canadian expat Brandon Thompson. He's a frequent contributor to the show, and he was nice enough to stop by the ICRT studio to tell us a few stories about life in Taiwan. In the studio that day, listening in, is myself, along with ICRT DJ Joey C. So there's no audience per se for this one, but don't be surprised if you hear us giggling in the background. Now, just so you know, the story we're about to hear is secondhand, not about Brandon. Actually happened to a friend of his. And just to set it up for him, the story starts with two expat guys working down in Yilan, eastern Taiwan. They just got off work, walking down the street. I'll let Brandon take it from here.
After teaching, I think it was like 8 o'clock at night, they were looking for a bar, and Yilan was small, not very many bars. So they found this one bar because it had a Heineken sign outside. Down in the basement, they went downstairs, started drinking, laughing, enjoying themselves. They had 3 beers each, maybe 2 or 3 anyways. They finished drinking at around like just after 10 or whatever. Went over to the bar, and they were like, okay, we'd like to pay to go. And they were like, no problem, $4,800. He was like, what are you talking about? He was like, $4,800, that's what you owe. It's like, but we only had like 6 beers. Here's whatever, this is what we owe. I'm like, no. And he brought a bat out from behind the bar, and they said, no, you owe more than that. See those girls there at the table? There were a whole bunch of tables pushed together, and there were girls at the end of the table that were girls that you supposedly buy drinks for. They were ordering drinks the whole night and just pouring them on the ground. They were ordering ladies' drinks, and I guess ladies' drinks are more expensive. So basically, he was like, there's no way we're paying this. And he goes, oh, you're going to pay this. They had the bat. And it was a friend of mine who was a bigger guy. He's like 6'4", 250 pounds, and the other guy was skinnier. And they ran outside the bar. The skinnier guy went one way, the heavier guy went the other way. And, of course, the 3 guys at the bar ran out, and they ran out after the guy who was heavier because, may as well catch one of them. So they ran after him, And they ran for like 3 or 4 blocks. They caught up to him in one of those small little community parks that's there, and he was like, of course he's big, so he's winded. He's like exhausted. He's like, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stand my ground. He stands there, and the guy with the bat actually surprisingly puts the bat down, and they just start going, they start fighting. Now, of course, it was crazy, but he was like, I was winning. I was actually winning. Like, I was holding my own against 3 guys, and I was feeling really good. Like, the one guy would come in, and I'd nail him in the face. He'd go down, and then another one. They were waiting their turn, almost like they were choreographing something. It was like, he was like, I felt pretty good for myself, and it must have been like a minute or so. I was winning, and all of a sudden, I turned around again, and I just felt a crack on my face because one of them had picked up the bat and cracked him. And then he woke up in the hospital. And he still remembers, he says he was getting stitched up by the doctor. And he woke up and he saw in the waiting room with him was the gangster from behind the bar, sitting there in the room with him. And he woke up and he goes startled. He like sits up and he's like, what the hell is happening right now? Then he said he could still see the needle hanging from his forehead. And the gangster was like, through the doctor's translation, the gangster was like, you must understand why we did that, don't you? He's like, we want to make sure you're okay, but we want to let you know that you can't steal money from us. And they were like, he was like, what? You're stealing money from me? But it's also amazing that you can get your ass kicked.
Right.
And somebody will take you to the hospital. I mean, tell me how he's doing. Is he okay? Okay. I got him these flowers. Is the card too much? Sorry I kicked your ass. But really, I'm not.
Did they take all of his money in the end?
He ended up paying them back. And then he actually went to that bar a couple more times because they apparently they got a better relationship, you know? It's crazy. Like because he took him to the hospital. It's like, it's weird. It is weird, you know?
Yeah.
To have that happen. It was kind of
it's almost like there's a guidebook for like gangster etiquette, and he's like, we had to do that because it's right here.
It is. That's exactly what it is. They have like a code like everybody else. This is what we do. Yeah? Sorry, got to do this right now. Gangsters, man.
Once again, that was Brandon Thompson. He performs in a band right here in Taiwan. Goes by the name Adoa. Check them out on their website, adoaband.com. That's ADOGA band.com. All right, that's it for the show today. You can let us know what you thought of the program by leaving a comment on the ICRT Facebook page or on our blog. This is actually the last show for a while. It's rounding out the 4-week run we had planned for November. If you want to continue hearing the program, please do shoot us an email or send us a comment. Let us know. And if you missed any part of the broadcast, you can find it online. Look for that on the ICRT blog or the Taiwan Talk podcast stream available on the ICRT website and on iTunes. Big thank you to all of our storytellers today. Also want to give a thank you to Taipei Slam founders and organizers Sean Scanlon and Mandy Rovita. The show today was produced by myself with production assistance from Ping Ping Liu. Thank you for tuning in from ICRT. I'm Keith Manconi. Until next time.